What is happening every day? Food prices are rising sharply, and that is why today we need to be direct. These 12 food items are what you should stockpile before a transportation crisis hits. During recent disruptions, a delay of just 10 to 20% in transport can push food prices up by 15 to 30%, and some items disappear within 24 to 48 hours. But the bigger issue is not running out of food. It is that you still have food, but you no longer eat the same way. You open the cabinet. There is food, but you close it. A crisis does not begin with hunger. So what disappears first? 12. Peanut butter. You open the lid and eat. No cooking, no water, no electricity. It sounds so simple that it is easy to underestimate. But in every mild disruption scenario, the kind that 80% of households will face before any major crisis, it is these simple things that remain last. 1 spoon of peanut butter is about 190 calories. No preparation, no thinking required. And that is the difference. Most people do not lack food. They lack the ability to use food when they are exhausted. According to consumer surveys in the United States during 2024 to 2025, more than 60% of home meals are replaced by fast food, not because of lack of ingredients, but because of lack of time and energy. You still have rice, beans, canned food, but you do not cook, and that is where the gap appears. Not in your pantry, but between having food and actually eating. Peanut butter exists to fill that gap. It is not a complete meal, but it prevents you from skipping meals, something that within 24 to 48 hours already begins to affect energy levels, focus, and even financial decisions. Sounds unreasonable? Not at all. When you are hungry and tired, you spend worse. You react worse. You handle situations worse. 1 spoon of peanut butter does not save the world, but it keeps you stable enough to not make things worse. Most foods come with conditions. They need cooking, water, time, awareness. Meanwhile, peanut butter is unconditional energy. You can eat it in the car, in the dark, during a power outage, or on a day when you simply do not want to do anything. And that is the real scenario. Not the end of the world, but days that fall out of rhythm. A detail few people notice. The average shelf life of peanut butter is 6 to 12 months unopened, and it can last longer if stored properly. No refrigerator needed. No complicated rotation required. Meanwhile, its cost per 100 calories is often much lower than other convenience foods. Put simply, it is one of the cheapest, most stable, and least system-dependent energy sources you can buy. Recently, as food costs in the United States continue to rise around 3 to 5% across categories, consumers are returning to products that are ready to eat, filling, and require minimal preparation. Peanut butter sits exactly at that intersection. Not because it is perfect, but because it is practical. You do not need to stockpile much. 2 to 3 jars at home are enough to create a buffer for days when you are not operating at 100%. And to be honest, those are the days you need preparation the most. So in your kitchen, how many things can you eat immediately without having to become the most disciplined version of yourself? 11. Ready-to-eat foods. The biggest mistake most people make is believing that if they have enough ingredients, they will still cook as usual. It sounds reasonable, until reality turns out differently. You open the cabinet. There is food, but you close it. You are not hungry. You just do not want to cook. When supply chains begin to slow down, the first thing that changes is not food, but your daily rhythm. You have more to do, more stress, less time. And things like electricity, gas, or simply stability in a day are no longer the same. According According to recent consumer behavior data, more than 55% of meals at home are replaced by quick options. Not because of lack of ingredients, but because of lack of time and energy. You still have food, but you no longer have the conditions to cook. This is the point many people fail to consider. Not a lack of food, but the inability to prepare it. A very small action repeated every day. You open the cabinet, you look, then you close it. You do not see danger. You just feel a little more tired each day. And that is when ready-to-eat foods begin to have value. Instant noodles about 350 calories per pack. Nutrition bars about 200 calories. A handful of dried fruit can keep you fueled for hours. Not for long-term use, not to replace real meals, but to fill the gap. The gap between the days you want to cook and the days you cannot. Without this buffer, something very small happens. You start skipping meals. Not because there is nothing to eat, but because you cannot prepare it. And skipping one meal is not the issue. But skipping 2 to 3 meals in a row, energy levels drop noticeably, focus declines, and you begin to make worse decisions without realizing it. This is not an extreme scenario. These are normal days, just out of rhythm. An afternoon when you get home 2 hours late. A day with a 4 to 6 hour power outage. A week when you work more than expected. Small things, but together they are enough to break routines. Ready-to-eat foods do not provide perfect nutrition, but they keep your system from breaking down. They help you maintain a basic rhythm. Eat, rest, continue. And in many cases, that is all you need to avoid falling into a cycle of fatigue. You do not need to stockpile too much. 3 to 5 days of ready-to-eat food is enough to create a practical buffer. Not for long-term survival, but to give you time to adjust when things no longer run smoothly. If tomorrow you do not feel like cooking, do you have enough at home to avoid skipping a meal? 10. Cooking fats. This is a gap that almost no one sees in advance until they stand in front of the stove. You open your kitchen cabinet. Rice, there. Beans, there. Canned food, there. Everything you need to eat for weeks is there. But when you start cooking, you realize something very simple. You have no oil. At first, it does not seem serious. You can still cook. But after just 2 to 3 meals, the problem becomes clear. The pan sticks. Food burns faster. Heat does not spread evenly. One meal takes an extra 10 to 15 minutes to manage, and the result is still worse than usual. You still eat, but you begin to eat less. Not because you want to, but because it becomes more unpleasant each time you eat. This is how the problem begins. Not with a lack of food, but with food becoming harder to use. And when that happens, you do not notice it immediately. You just find yourself taking more time, having less interest, and losing energy in a very quiet way. According to basic nutrition data, fat provides about 9 calories per gram, more than twice that of carbohydrates and protein. When it is missing, not only does the way you cook change, but your total energy intake also drops without you realizing it. You still eat enough volume, but not enough actual energy to maintain your usual level of activity. But there is a deeper layer of the problem that many people do not realize. Certain essential vitamins, A, D, E, K, require fat to be absorbed. Without fat, absorption rates can drop significantly, in some cases below 50%. That means you are still eating vegetables, still eating complete foods, but your body is not actually using them. You are still eating enough, but the real nutritional value is reduced. This is a type of decline with no clear signs, no warning, no immediate symptoms. You do not suddenly become weak. You just are no longer at your best, slower, more tired, less energy, and you do not know why. In recent periods, cooking oil prices in many markets have fluctuated by 20 to 40% in waves, influenced by transportation costs, weather, and global supply. And when prices rise, people often cut it first because they think it is not important. In reality, the opposite is true. Fat is not just a cooking ingredient. It is what keeps your entire food system functioning properly. It helps you cook faster, eat more easily, and absorb nutrients more effectively. Without it, you do not stop eating. You just gradually eat less. You do not need to stockpile too much, but you need enough to avoid disruption. A few bottles of oil, equivalent to 2 to 4 weeks of use, can make a bigger difference than you think. Not because of calories, but because it keeps everything else working as usual. Think about this. If tomorrow you still have plenty of food, but no oil, would you really eat the same way? 9. Salt. Try a very simple meal. White rice, beans, a little canned food, no salt. On the first day, you still eat. On the second day, you eat less. On the third day, you look at the plate and do not want to eat anymore. Nothing changes in the amount of food, but the eating experience drops clearly. There is no warning, no obvious sign. You just eat a little less each day. According to nutrition studies, when sodium is lacking, appetite decreases significantly, especially with repetitive meals. And with simple meals, already low in flavor, salt is no longer just seasoning. It is the condition that allows you to keep eating. Salt does not make meals taste better. It makes meals possible to eat for many consecutive days. A meal lacking enough salt can cause you to consume 10 to 20% less food than needed without realizing it. And if that continues for 3 to 5 days, your energy level begins to drop. But there is a deeper layer to the problem. Salt is not only on the table, it is in how your body functions. Sodium is the main electrolyte that helps regulate fluid balance, nerve transmission, and muscle activity. When it is lacking, the body does not fail immediately. It just begins to function less efficiently. You do not collapse. You just feel a bit more tired, a bit slower, a bit less focused. Small changes, but they build up over time. According to common recommendations, an adult needs about 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. Not a large number. But if you eat home-cooked, minimally processed foods and do not add salt, you can drop below that level faster than you think. During periods of supply fluctuation, salt is rarely the first thing to disappear, but iodized salt, the type with added micronutrients, is often overlooked and easily replaced by lower-value options. And that is a quiet mistake. You do not need to stockpile much, but you need enough to avoid disruption. A few kilograms of salt can sustain hundreds of meals, and more importantly, keep you able to eat everything you have prepared. The issue is not whether you have enough food, but whether you can finish what you have or not. 8. Spices and sauces. This is when your body begins to work against you. Not through illness, but through boredom. The same meal, the same flavor, repeated day after day. On the first day, you still eat normally. On the second day, you begin to eat about 10% less. By the third or fourth day, intake can drop 20 to 30% simply because you are no longer interested. Nothing changes about the food, only the feeling. You are not hungry. You just delay. You lift the lid, look at the meal, and you do not want to begin. Your body has a very simple mechanism. The more familiar leads to the more bored leads to the less you eat. This is not subjective. In nutrition, this phenomenon is called sensory fatigue. When the same flavor repeats too often, the brain reduces its positive response to food. The result? You still have food, but you no longer want to eat it. This is something many people do not understand. They stock enough for 2 to 3 weeks, but after 3 to 5 days, they begin to eat less. Not because of shortage, but because they no longer have the motivation to continue. And that is when spices and sauces begin to have value. A little heat from chili, a little saltiness from soy sauce, a little acidity from vinegar. Just a 5 to 10% change in flavor can reset the eating experience. An old meal becomes a new meal, and you eat normally again. It does not change nutrition, but it changes behavior. One bottle of sauce can be used for 15 to 20 meals. One small jar of spices can last for dozens of days. The cost is very low, but the impact on how much you eat is significant. In many cases, just maintaining stable intake for an extra 2 to 3 days is enough to avoid cumulative decline. Spices do not help you survive. They help you keep eating. And in periods when everything repeats, lacks variety, and pressure increases, the ability to keep eating is what keeps your system from breaking down. You should buy enough variety. 3 to 5 basic spices, 1 to 2 familiar sauces are enough to turn a monotonous menu into something you can sustain longer. If you had to eat the same meal for 4 days in a row, are you sure you would still eat enough? 7. Honey, there is something very small, but you will think about it very quickly. Not when you are hungry, but when you are bored. After 3 to 5 days of repetitive eating, the issue is not lack of food. It is that you no longer want to eat the same way. The food is still there, but the feeling changes. Drier, harder, missing that highlight. You open the meal, look at it, and you delay for a few more minutes. You are not hungry. You just do not want to begin. 1 spoon of honey is about 60 calories. Not significant in terms of energy, but its value is not in calories. It is in behavior. Just a little sweetness can make a monotonous meal immediately more acceptable. Not better in a luxury sense, but enough for you to continue. Sweetness is a signal. A very primitive signal to the body that things are still okay. When that signal appears, the boredom response decreases. You return to eating more normally, not more, but enough to avoid gradually declining each day. But honey does not stop there. When combined with kumquat, honey helps soothe the throat, reducing irritation from coughing or dryness, a very common issue when eating repetitive meals or lacking water. When combined with black turmeric, honey can help reduce stomach discomfort, especially during periods of irregular or disrupted eating. This is not a medical solution, but simple ways to make the body feel more comfortable and keep functioning. Honey also has a very rare characteristic. It almost never spoils. Low moisture, natural antibacterial properties make it difficult for microorganisms to grow. No refrigeration needed. No dependence on electricity. A small jar can last for a long time without complex handling. Meanwhile, just 1 to 2 spoonfuls per day is enough to create a noticeable difference in the eating experience. Not because of major nutrition, but because it keeps you from turning away from your meals. This is not a main food. This is a sensory buffer. What keeps you going when you begin to want to stop? If you had to eat the same meal for a few more days, do you have something that helps you not skip meals? 6. Base carbohydrates, you will not notice its role. until it disappears from your meal. You still eat. Meat, there, vegetables, there, protein, enough. Everything looks right on the surface, but after just 1 to 2 hours, you feel hungry again. Not intense hunger, just a sense that something is missing that you cannot quite name. You finish eating, but do not feel full. You return to the kitchen sooner. You eat more frequently. You are not hungry, you just are never truly full. According to basic nutritional observation, when base carbohydrates are lacking, meal frequency can increase from 2 to 3 meals to 4 to 5 times per day, while total calories are not actually low. The issue is not quantity, it is structure. It is not a lack of calories. It is a lack of foundation. Carbohydrates provide about 4 calories per gram. Lower than fat, but the most stable and easily used energy source for the body. With foods like rice, oats, potatoes, pasta, energy is released more steadily, maintaining fullness for 3 to 4 hours. When they are missing, energy comes quickly, but leaves quickly as well. You eat enough, but you do not retain it. You open a meal, there is enough of everything. But the feeling is still fragmented. Carbohydrates are not just energy. They are what anchor a meal. They connect protein, fat, and other components into a complete system. Without them, everything you eat feels like separate pieces, sufficient in nutrition, but not sufficient in experience. You eat, but you do not finish a meal. This does not happen immediately. It accumulates. On the first day, you just feel hungry a little sooner. On the second day, you begin to snack 20 to 30% more. By the third day, you realize you are always in a state of not enough. There is no warning, no clear sign. You do not suddenly become weak. You just lose stability. What keeps your day in rhythm? During periods when food costs increase by 3 to 5% across categories, many people tend to cut carbohydrates because they think it is unnecessary. But in reality, this is the part that keeps your entire eating system running smoothly. Remove it, you do not save much, but you lose stability. You do not need to stockpile too much, but you need enough so that each meal has a base. 1 to 2 kilograms of rice, some oats, or any familiar carbohydrate source can make a bigger difference than you think. Not because of calories, but because it keeps you full and maintains your normal rhythm. If your meals lack carbohydrates for a few days, would you notice that you are eating more, but still not feeling satisfied? 5. Stored protein, you still eat enough, but your body begins to slowly lose. This is the kind of deficiency you do not feel immediately. You still eat. You still feel full. One meal can be 400 to 600 calories, even more. You are not hungry. You do not skip meals. Everything on the surface still looks fine. But inside, something very different is happening. Your body begins to draw from within. Protein is not just meat. It is the foundation of muscle, the immune system, and recovery processes. On average, an adult needs about 50 to 70 grams of protein per day. But in reality, when the diet becomes imbalanced or limited, that number can drop to 20 to 30 grams without you noticing. And when that happens, the body does not stop. It adapts. It begins to take protein from itself, from muscle, from stored tissue, to maintain more critical functions. This process does not cause pain, does not create shock. It happens quietly, day by day. You still do everything as before, but it does not feel the same. You take longer to recover after fatigue. A small wound takes an extra 1 to 2 days to heal. You feel tired more easily after normal tasks, and overall energy is about 10 to 15% lower than before. No warning, no clear sign. You do not suddenly become weak. You just are no longer the same. This is where many people overlook. They still eat enough, so they think everything is fine. But enough calories does not mean enough protein. A meal high in carbohydrates and fat can make you full, but does not provide enough material for the body to maintain and repair itself. And this is why protein is often the first group affected when the system fluctuates. Higher cost, shorter shelf life, greater dependence on cold chains. When things begin to slow down, protein becomes the least stable. That is when stored protein sources become important. Dry beans, canned fish, canned meat, or protein powder. Not for taste, not for variety, but to ensure that each day you still have at least 40 to 60 grams of protein, the minimum level to prevent your body from sacrificing itself. You do not need to stockpile too much, but you need enough to maintain consistency for 5 to 7 days if things are disrupted. Just a short gap is enough for the decline process to begin. If you eat enough but still feel more tired, do you know what your body is missing? 4. Stable vegetables. This is the part most people overlook, because they think vegetables are always available. But in reality, it is the opposite. Fresh vegetables are the most transportation-dependent food group. The time from harvest to shelf is usually only 2 to 5 days. Just a 24 to 48-hour delay in the supply chain, and quality begins to decline noticeably. Freshness drops. Prices can rise 10 to 25% in waves, and the selection on the shelf becomes smaller. You still eat. Nothing seems wrong immediately, but after 2 to 3 weeks, changes begin to appear in a very quiet way. You do not recover as quickly as before. After a tiring day, you need more time to regain energy. Normal tasks feel slightly heavier. You are not in pain, not sick. You still eat, but you no longer feel as well as before. The problem is not a lack of calories. It is a lack of micronutrients, things the body needs in small amounts, but have a large impact on immunity, energy, and recovery. When fresh vegetable intake drops, you do not notice immediately. But after 10 to 14 days, the effects begin to accumulate. This is a type of decline many people do not consider. No warning, no clear signs. You do not suddenly become weak. You just gradually lose stability. In an unstable system, stability becomes an advantage. Canned or dried vegetables are not perfect. Some vitamins may be reduced during processing, but in return, they are stable. Shelf life of 12 to 24 months, not dependent on daily transport, no complex storage needed, and most importantly, always available when you need them. A can of vegetables may not be fresh, but it ensures you are not completely interrupted. Just maintaining 1 to 2 servings per day, you can keep a stable micronutrient base, instead of letting your body fall into prolonged deficiency. You do not need to eat perfectly, you just need to not be deficient for too long. If fresh vegetables disappear for a few days, do you have something stable at home to replace them? 3. Vinegar at first glance. It does not belong on this list. Not a main food. Does not provide energy. 1 tablespoon of vinegar has almost no calories. It does not make you full. It does not help you survive in a direct way. But it does something very few things can do. Sometimes, what keeps you from skipping a meal is not the food. A small amount of vinegar, just 5 to 10 milliliters, can completely change the eating experience. It cuts heaviness, sharpens flavor, makes it about 10 to 15% easier to eat without you noticing. A monotonous meal becomes more acceptable. You do not realize its importance until you do not have it. But that is not the most important point. Vinegar has natural acidity that helps slow the growth of bacteria under certain conditions. That means you can extend the usability of food by 24 to 48 hours in less than ideal situations. No refrigerator needed, no equipment, no complex system. In an environment where everything is no longer on time, keeping food for one more day can make a big difference. A meal not thrown away, an ingredient not wasted, enough time for you to adjust. Vinegar can also be used for cleaning, odor removal, or basic food handling. One small bottle can serve 20 to 30 different uses. Low cost, long shelf life, no dependence on complex storage conditions. This is not something you buy to eat. This is something you have to upgrade everything else. The value of vinegar is not in itself. It is in how it expands the usefulness of what you already have, helping you cook easier, eat easier, and keep food a little longer. If everything in your kitchen starts to fall out of rhythm, do you have something that can give you one more day? 2. Powdered milk. There are things you do not realize the value of until they disappear. A morning coffee, a familiar breakfast, a routine repeated every day without thinking. Not because of nutrition, but because of structure. When these things disappear, you do not just lose a meal, you lose a part of normal. And that affects more than you think. According to behavioral studies, changing just 1 to 2 morning habits can significantly reduce psychological stability throughout the day. Not because you lack energy, but because you lose a familiar starting point. You still eat, you still drink, but the feeling of being in rhythm is gone. Powdered milk does not completely replace fresh milk. The taste is different, the texture is different, but it keeps something more important: the ability to maintain routine. Just 20 to 30 grams mixed with water, and you can recreate a small part of your previous day. A cup of coffee with milk. A breakfast that feels familiar. It sounds small, but during periods of 5 to 7 days of instability, these small details help you maintain daily rhythm. You wake up on time more easily. You start the day more smoothly, and you are less likely to fall out of schedule. Powdered milk has a clear advantage: long shelf life, typically 12 to 24 months if stored properly. No refrigeration needed. No dependence on cold chains. The first system to be disrupted. And with just a small amount each day, you can maintain routine for weeks. Meanwhile, fresh milk usually lasts only 5 to 10 days and depends entirely on continuous cold transport. When the system slows down, this is one of the first groups to disappear, before you even notice. Powdered milk is not to fully replace. It is to avoid complete disruption. In unstable periods, small things that keep life feeling normal are what keep you from drifting off course. Sometimes, stability does not come from calories. It comes from routine. 1. Ability to use food. This is where everything comes together. You can have rice, beans, canned food, protein, everything on this list. A fully stocked kitchen, a carefully prepared plan. On the surface, nothing is missing, and still not be able to eat. No water, no gas, no electricity. Rice needs water. On average, 1 cup of rice requires 2 cups of water. Dry beans need 6 to 8 hours of soaking and 1 to 2 hours of cooking. Food needs heat. A simple meal can require 20 to 40 minutes of preparation if everything is working normally. Without infrastructure, food is only potential, not something you can use. This is not an assumption. This is how the system operates. When transportation slows by 10 to 20%, not only food is affected, Fuel arrives slower. Electricity is disrupted across areas. Water supply may become unstable for 4 to 6 hours or longer. And at that point, the issue is no longer what you have. It is how much of it you can actually use. A household may stock enough food for 2 to 3 weeks, but without the ability to use it, the amount they can actually consume may drop to 50 to 60%. The rest sits there, unusable when needed. That is the gap between preparation and usage. The ability to use food is not a single item. It is a system. Stored water, simple cooking equipment, alternative heat sources, and most importantly, foods that can be eaten immediately when everything else stops working. Without that system, everything you have is just numbers. With that system, even a small amount of food becomes enough. In the end, the question is not how much you have. It is how much you can actually use when conditions are no longer the same. You do not need to prepare perfectly. You just need to prepare correctly. What you just saw is not a list to stockpile more, but a way to keep your life from falling out of rhythm when things begin to slow down. A crisis rarely begins with hunger. It begins with small inconveniences, repeated every day, until you no longer function the way you used to. And the difference is not how much you have. It is how much you can use when conditions are no longer the same. And by the time you realize that, it is usually too late to start preparing from the beginning. If tomorrow you had to live with what you currently have, would you be okay? In the next video, 12 foods you will regret not buying before May 2026.